All right, welcome to the Digital Strategy Works YouTube video channel. My name is Tony Zeoli, and I'm the founder of Digital Strategy Works, a WordPress web development and digital strategy consulting company down here in Asheville, North Carolina. Today, I wanted to talk about project management, just a little bit about WordPress project management and some of the things that I'm doing, and a couple of issues that have arisen and challenges that I faced that I've had to resolve in the project management process. And I think it's beneficial to talk about some of these challenges so that you, the viewer, if you're running a WordPress project or you're running any web design project, whether it's a mobile app or any kind of project that involves developers, project managers, graphic designers, that you can kind of take from my knowledge and apply it to your project. So first and foremost, currently I'm running 3 pretty big projects, and I'm also working with a bunch of different small businesses through Mountain BizWorks, a lending and learning organization here in Asheville, where I coach small businesses on digital strategy and WordPress web development with e-commerce components and these kinds of things. So I want to talk about how I manage that process. And I've come to a couple of tools that have helped me to manage people, manage conversations, and manage time. And there are a bunch of different tools out there, and I'm not saying that my tools are the best tools, but what I'd like to convey is that they work for me, and the way that I have them synced together, they end up helping me really manage these projects efficiently. Unfortunately, I don't have the ability to do screenshots of these tools and in this first video until I edit the video and potentially add those screenshots in. So what I'm going to try to do is just explain, and maybe you can go and find out more about these tools online on their websites, and you can adopt them for your project. So first and foremost, I use a product called Basecamp. Many of you are familiar with Basecamp if you're working in project management for small businesses, because that's what the tool is really for. It's really for the small business. It's not very advanced or sophisticated. It's very simple in the fact that you can have messages, you can have to-do lists, you can have a timeline, and you can have files, like a file manager area where you can upload files, and in every element and pages, which I'll talk about in a minute. So in every aspect of whatever you post in Basecamp, someone can converse on that post, whether it's a message, whether it's a task or a to-do in the list, in the task list, or whether it's a file or something like that. And you can start a conversation inside Basecamp, and someone might get an email, they may respond to an email, or they may log into Basecamp on the link and they could respond there. What that does is, even though it has a reliance on email, it still allows us to have threaded conversations on topics. And it's very important when you're working with multiple projects to really separate out, number one, the companies that you're working with into different Basecamp projects, and then separate out each conversation into a message or topic that you want to talk about, and then have a threaded conversation on that topic. It's very hard to go back in Gmail or Yahoo or any other, maybe you use Outlook on a desktop or any other software application, and even if you star things or even if you put them in buckets, it's still just hard to go back to and sort through and do a search for those conversations that you're having. So I like Basecamp in the sense that I have a structured conversation in a project, and I add a title to that conversation, and we talk about that thing in that threaded conversation. Now, someone could choose to respond by email once they get it in their email inbox, or they can log into Basecamp and navigate to the, read the whole thread, navigate to the bottom of the thread, and then post something. The other advantage is that you can add files into a conversation. So if you had screenshots or some file upload that you needed to add, you can do that within the Basecamp conversation, and that maybe that screenshot will populate and actually show in the thread So that way I don't have to open the screenshot in an email and see it as a separate attachment or something like that. It just becomes visual in the thread. The other thing that I like about Basecamp is the to-dos and the list. And you can separate those out by, for example, I have front-end development, back-end development, graphic design. I may add different to-do lists, and then under that list title, then I have different tasks, and I can schedule those tasks to be completed by a person that I've added into Basecamp so say, for example, I need a logo design. I need first round design by March 1st. I need second round, feedback by March 7th. I need second round by March 14th. I can set those to-dos under a to-do list, and I can assign different individuals. Now, the issue with that in Basecamp is that you can really only assign one individual to one task at a time, and you have to change the individual based on whether you want feedback from someone else on that to do. And that is probably a little, I should say, frustrating in some respects, because sometimes you want 2 or 3 people to take action on a to-do. And so you have to set up multiple to-dos for them, multiple take actions, and there's multiple threads. So that's maybe a downfall, a little bit of a downfall of Basecamp, in the sense that you can't add 3 different individuals to a to-do and have those individuals each have a responsibility on that to-do for a task. So that's why I use Trello, which is another project management system, and we'll get into that in a minute. And so additionally to Basecamp, there's a Files tab. So you can go on the to-dos, and you could talk about, add a to-do, and then add a post or add a message to that to-do to the person that you're targeting, and add them and a target date for them to respond or to complete that task. The Files tab is anytime you add a file, whether you're adding a file in a message, whether you're adding a file in a to-do, or whether you're just adding a file itself, you can then comment on those files and have a running thread about that file too under the Files Manager. And you can search for files that you're looking for. Hopefully you remember the names, and you can label files. So you can give them a tag and say, graphic design or mockups, or you could say, information architecture documents. And so you can tag each file that you upload with a specific tag, 1 or 2 tags, or even 3 tags, and then you can sort all your files by tags and find exactly what you want to look for in Basecamp. Now that's a great tool to use for simple project management. But in terms of advanced project management, when you want to work in the concept of Agile and Scrum, where you have a bunch of product backlog items, and you set them in cards, and you set different individuals on that card related to that task, and then you can set some color-coded scheming to that, whether it's something that's low priority, medium priority, high priority. You can set a target date for that task. You can communicate on the card to everyone just like you could in Basecamp, but then you can move those cards along in different rows that you set up. So you can say, I have my product backlog items, then I have a second row that I have my in development, and then I have my first QA or push to staging, and then push to staging and first QA, and then I have my bugs list, so I can move that card along those columns and get it into the bugs list, and then the person can, developer or designer, can take care of the bug or feature request, and then I can move it back into the prior in development again, and then they can work on it, comment on it, and then move it back to staging. I can QA it, and then I can move it back to deploy, or forward to deploy, or forward to whatever the different rows that I've set up for. So it's a card-based system with little cards, and you can comment on those cards, open up those cards, and they have description, they have each individual that's joined the team, whether it's internal to the team or external to the team. Everyone can comment on those cards, and just like Basecamp, comments go out by email. Someone can respond by email, have that comment then be loaded as into the discussion as a threaded response. So that's what I use Trello for. Now the advantage of Trello is that they have integrations with things like Slack. Now if you're using Slack, you know how it's a powerful communication tool for teams, so you can sit down and set up different channels in your primary Slack channel. For example, I have Digital Strategy Works, but then I set up sub channels within Digital Strategy Works, my account, for different projects, and I can talk to all my developers and designers about a project within that specific channel for that project. Now, what I do in Trello is Trello has an integration with Slack, so when I add a card to Trello, I can then send that card into Slack and select the user in Slack or select the developer in Slack, and it will go directly to that developer. So it won't go into the Slack channel for maybe one project, but it will go directly to that developer in Slack, and then he can pick up that card in Slack and say, oh, okay, I have to work on this, instead of always either checking his email or having to go into Slack and see what the updates are. So that's a great advantage of Slack. Slack and Trello together provide a better method of project management for the Agile Scrum team to continue on and do what they do best, and communicate and collaborate to build web projects or mobile projects or whatever have you. So wanted to talk a little bit about that, and then I also want to talk about time tracking. So in my projects, there is a issue where you must track time so you can bill back your clients on the developer's time or whoever took time to work on this project. So I use a tool called HarvestApp, HarvestApp, HarvestApp. I think it's harvestapp.com, and you can set up invoicing, time tracking, and budgets and these kinds of things in that tool. You could even ask for retainers and assign them to a project and burn down the retainer hours. Or you could say, well, there isn't a retainer and I want to base this project on hours, and then you can track those hours for the different developers that you assign in and ask them to track their time in Slack based on the project and based on the project tasks. And you can set you can set like a task rate for that task, or you can set a developer rate for that developer. And those are that's a really good tool to really track time, set rates against that time, aggregate all those hours, and then invoice your client. And so what I've been doing is using Harvest to track that time, to invoice those clients, and then it could invoice them with just the hours, or you could invoice them with all the tasks based on all the accumulated hours, and then send that so they can have a full accounting of exactly what each person did in their workflow. Once you send that to the client, I have Stripe connected to my Harvest tool, and that's connected to my Wells Fargo account. So if someone decides to pay by credit card, they can pay right online using the Stripe interface. That payment will come in. It will then trigger and say this invoice was paid in Harvest. I have QuickBooks and Wells Fargo associated with that. So once QuickBooks is then updated, it says, oh, okay, I got this invoice. It's now in QuickBooks. This invoice was paid, and the money has been deposited into Wells Fargo, and it all, works together in tandem to track the hours, the payments, in my accounting system and in my time tracking tool, and that makes life just that much easier for me. Yes, there is a small cost to each of these tools, and you're going to have to build those costs into your monthly spend for your business. But overall, those are the types of things that really are helpful in driving project management and billing operations for small digital strategy consulting company. The second thing I wanted to talk about in terms of project management is the jumping ahead. One of the hardest things when you have multiple people on a project and it's not very clear as to who the primary stakeholder is and who the decision maker is, and you have multiple people working in Basecamp or Trello and they're all communicating. Maybe one person doesn't see that communication on the team and he's the project lead, and then someone decides to take some action based on feedback that they got maybe the night before, and the project lead hasn't seen it and hasn't said, you go in and now do this. One of the things that's one of the things that can happen in a project is where individuals kind of take charge themselves, which isn't a bad thing. You want your team to be fluid, to participate, to be aggressive, to get things done. But on the reverse, you also want to make sure that you're in control of the project. And when I say control, I don't mean that you're a stick in the mud and you just want control, but because you want control. When a piece of information comes in, just like anything that we do, whether you get information from your wife about a party that you need to go to, or whether you get information from your son or your daughter's teacher about their report card and what they could do to improve things, you get a piece of information and you must analyze that piece of information and slow down everybody on the team from taking action until such time as you can analyze it. So for example, I got a piece of information that said, we need donations on our site. We already had a donations plugin that we were using, and we decided to eliminate that plugin in favor of going in a different direction with, instead of using a specific donations module plugin, actually integrating donations with WooCommerce on a WordPress site. And with that integration, you could just use WooCommerce and set up a product and have variations and say, oh, here's a product, someone can just donate and go. But really, at the end of the day, the business requirements state, well, there needs to be recurring donations. We might want somebody to make a donation when they purchase a product. We might want somebody to make a donation when they check out. So we want to make sure that in the checkout process, or if somebody's buying a T-shirt and they want to donate at the same time, for some nonprofit, which is, really what we're working on is a nonprofit website, that we provide all those opportunities. Now there are two plugins that I had to go out and research and find that actually do integrate with WooCommerce, and one of the two does more or less everything that we need. But those business requirements weren't written down for the developer, so he kind of jumped ahead, had heard from the client what they wanted, but didn't yet check in with me to say, do I do this now? So that was burning hours on implementing something quick and dirty that wasn't really, at the end of the day, what the business requirements called for. Sure, should we have written business requirements? Yes. Sometimes in an agile process, there aren't written business requirements, so it's really important for all team members and stakeholders to communicate before you take action. And that's just one example that I wanted to talk about today about doing something in your project management process to ensure that everyone on the team knows they shouldn't jump ahead before the new idea or the new feedback is vetted, approved, and then pushed forward. And how you do that is you really have an honest conversation with your team in the beginning, and you talk about roles and responsibilities, and you ask everyone to observe a role, but you don't say, just check with me first. You also explain, you're going to check with me because I may have additional information, or stop, I may have to go out and research and then come back and tell you why or why not this may be a good idea, a bad idea, or an idea that we need to put on hold, or move something in front of that idea, or let that idea go, to the back, kick on the back burner for a minute. So in your product development process, in your project development process, it's really important to be upfront with all the stakeholders and let them know what the decision-making process is on every single thing that you do. You don't want to burn hours on something that is unnecessary and then bill back the client. The client will come back to you and say, well, he went out and ran down that road, but nobody told him to go down that road. So that can be an issue, and the developer might not think that way because the developer's not in charge of the budget. So that's okay, because developers don't need to be in charge of budgets, but it's the project manager's responsibility to call in and say, this is why we're doing this, this is how we're going to approach it, and this is how we all need to follow a protocol so we don't burn unnecessary hours, we don't bill the client for R&D that was unnecessary, and that we can be a little bit tighter in our communication and our development process. So those are the things I want to talk about today. If you want to learn more about Digital Strategy Works, it's https://digitalstrategyworks.com, or you can find me at TonyZeoli, ZEOLI.com on the web. Thank you for watching today, and we'll be back with another segment on WordPress web development and project management in the future. Thank you.